This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people in Melbourne.
Welcome to the POWcast, a podcast from Protect Our Winters Australia, where we chat to people who live and breathe the mountains and are on a mission to protect them. I'm your host, James Worsfold, and I'm joined here today by mountain lover and POW volunteer, Maya Shin. Maya, give us an overview of POW and your role within it.
Yeah, thanks, James. POW is an organisation dedicated to educating, informing and inspiring people to protect our winters. Several branches around the world, and we are from the Australian branch. I joined POW a year ago due to my background in environmental science, and joined with my passion for the mountains and snowboarding, and it just made sense.
Maya, you're an environmental scientist who has focused on alpine regions. What are some things about the alpine environment that inspires you?
Australia's alpine environment is one of the most unique ecosystems in the world and is used as an indicator in global reports for impacts on climate change. It's an extremely small percentage of the Australian environment, and yet has such a diverse range of plants and animals that you literally can't find anywhere else in Australia, let alone the world. So it's just such a special place. It's so beautiful in such harsh conditions, and it sees the extremes of cold winters with snow versus quite hot summers. You know, to see those two extremes as a species is really rare. And I just find so much beauty in it.
Maya, you said that the Australian Alps are a bit of a global indicator of what's happening in the mountains and how climate change is affecting them. So it's really a canary in the coal mine, the Australian ski season and the Australian Alps, which is why we here at POW Australia are fighting really hard to protect it. So here at POW, we're building a broad coalition of individuals, of communities and of businesses who have a stake in the ski season in the mountains and who all have something to lose with climate change.
Yeah, businesses are run by individuals, but at a corporate scale or close to it. And when an individual running a business leans towards sustainability or better practices, they can really inspire and have a huge impact on the community around them.
And this is the story of our guest today. Scott Brandon, the owner of Bright Brewery, has put sustainability and community in the forefront. And I had a fascinating chat about the role of his business in affecting change in the community.
Awesome, let's jump into it.
Okay, so my name's Scott Brandon. I'm the owner of Bright Brewery. What do? I do lots of things. The brewery's a big part of our life, but I'm also a mad keen skier, mountain biker, traveller, and climbing in my past as well.
So you've been owning and operating Bright Brewery for over 20 years. What were you doing before that? And then how did you get to the point where you were like, hey, I want to start a brewery?
Yeah, sure. I was. I actually studied engineering at university. I did a mechanical engineering degree. I pretty quickly fell into a job working in software development as a project manager there. So the first 10, 15 years of my career were actually working in IT. With that, sitting at a computer typing away gets you pretty quickly actually, and so I was constantly getting itchy feet, trying to get away on weekends. But then in the middle, took a few years off and went to just be a ski bum in Canada for a couple of years.
And did you catch the bug?
Called the bug right there, yeah. And I think that was part of my plan. I really wanted to get a feel for that whole lifestyle of living in the snow, skiing pretty much as much as you possibly can. And also in Canada, I'd over summer off the ski season, I'd started to dabble with a bit of mountaineering. Travelled up through Alaska, did some ice climbing, those sorts of things, and really got to appreciate some of those big wild places. Came home with a whole new appreciation for what was out there.
How did you put this appreciation into your life in Australia and your life at Bright?
I'd always grown up with an awareness of the environment and the need to act sustainably. My parents were, they had solar hot water systems, and from way back in the day, the technology's changed so much since then. But we grew up in a rural environment down on the Mornington Peninsula, and it was, we were just very close to the bush. And I think with these travels, you'd go to areas and you'd see, especially things like glaciers, how much they were already changing back in the 90s. They were well and truly receding. I remember my folks talking about climate change back in the 80s, when it was first started to be talked about, and a lot of it was really dismissed significantly back then. But once I was travelling, and you actually see glaciers that, where you can see where it had been maybe 50 years ago, and now it was way back up the valley, and in places like Europe, that was super obvious back then, and now you go back and it's just the amount that they've receded since the 90s is again incredible. So I think I've always had it instilled in me that we need to try and be as considerate as we can to what the impact is that we're having on the earth, and try and minimise any negative effects that we're doing. So, to me, it's been painfully slow, the uptake or the awareness. And I guess when we see organisations like Protect Our Winters come along, that is trying to get that understanding more into the mainstream, or more into a segment of the community that doesn't necessarily be aware of it, even though technically they should be. If you're a skier, it's got to be pretty clear that our winters are getting shorter and the snow isn't going as far down the mountain. But I think so many people still just, they have short memories, and they don't realise that, that what they're doing, what everybody is doing, is having an impact on that.
Bright Brewery is Protect Our Winters Australia's longest standing partner. Why was it important for your business to partner with this organisation?
Well, I think I'd been aware of Protect Our Winters before I was aware that there was an Australian arm to it. So I was aware of the organisation in the US. I felt that what they were doing was really valuable. And when I realised that there was somebody in Australia trying to get this arm off the ground, I thought, well, let's see what we can do to try and support them. So that was probably around 2019, I think. And so we reached out. It was, and actually the idea, well, we were just keen to support in any way, but what we ended up coming up with was a beer, our POW Pale Ale. Unfortunately, we went straight into, by the time we had it ready, it was 2020. So we went straight into COVID, and even though we had the beer, there wasn't really many skiers to actually, or many people in the resorts to actually drink it. And so we had that issue for 2020, 2021. And then we really started to try and launch it again in 2022, 2023. So it's starting. We're starting to get some traction with it, the idea with it really is to help raise awareness on the mountain or wherever we are serving that beer. So if people are buying the beer, it's another point of contact for them to be aware of Protect Our Winters, and hopefully learn something about what Protect Our Winters is trying to achieve. But on top of that, we do take a percentage of each of the sales of the beer, and we contribute that back to Protect Our Winters Australia to try and further its cause. Yeah.
Well, while we're at it, let's do some shameless self-promotion. The Bright Brewery POW Pale Ale. Yeah. Tell us about it.
It's just we wanted to make it really approachable. So it's just a nice, easy drinking pale ale. Something that we can hopefully get into as many venues around the ski fields as possible, and that's why we wanted to make it approachable. And we want people to be buying that over something else. And so, last year we managed to get it into quite a few venues, especially around Mount Hotham and Falls Creek, which is our main region. That's our local region, so that's the easiest for it to get into. This year, I'd love to see it in more parts of the country, and it's in cans and it's on tap. So, there's plenty of opportunities for bars, and I think it's just such a great fit for the ski areas. Personally, I think any bar would be crazy not to put it on, but it's got a great story behind it too. Every beer that we do sell goes back into helping to support Protect Our Winters Australia.
So POW Australia is growing, and we are achieving more and more by the day. Where do you see this relationship going, both with Bright Brewery but also with other businesses?
Yeah, and that's fantastic to see. It's really great to see such a energetic young team coming, taking that on and really trying to progress it. So, I'm really looking forward to this year. I think there's a great opportunity to work together to really build that awareness, and hopefully it'll inspire other businesses to come on board too to help to support it.
Obviously, individuals and businesses doing their bit to decarbonise and become more sustainable is important, but the largest amount of change can be made when people act collectively. What would you like to see communities such as Bright or businesses within the ski sector come together to do?
Yeah, look, you're spot on, and certainly that's one of the things I feel as the owner of a business like Bright Brewery. We have a lot more capacity to make a difference as a business than I do as an individual, and so that's something that I'm really passionate about, making sure we make the most of that. And by extension, if you can then get your town on board with the same sort of thing, then you can have an even bigger impact. I think the biggest changes come from policy change by our governments. So the best thing we really can do is vote for people who are going to make a difference. That should be the number one priority for everybody. But certainly, as a town, we have an organisation in Bright called Sustainable Upper Ovens that I was involved in helping to get off the ground probably 8 or so years ago, I think. And that's doing some really great initiatives around community batteries, improvements to or upgrades to residential houses to make them more energy efficient, getting deals on hot water services by doing collective purchasing arrangements, things like that. So that organisation has been, things like that have been really great to help get a community off the ground. We look to Yakandanda, who has some incredible initiatives going on in their small town, they're a testament to how much you can do as a community. Yakandanda, I think, I don't remember the exact details, but I know that they, a big chunk of their energy is produced by solar. So, it could be even completely offset or something like that. But it is phenomenal what they've managed to do, and hopefully Bright can achieve the same sorts of outcomes.
Bright as a community is adjacent to ski resorts, and there are a lot of emissions associated with the operation and transport to those. What would you like to see your big neighbours do to reduce emissions?
Yeah, I think aiming to go carbon neutral, I think, is the biggest step, and there are plenty of ski resorts all around the world that have actually achieved that. And if anyone should be interested in doing that, it should be our ski resorts. They have the most to lose from climate change. So, it just astounds me that some of them seem to drag the chain so much. But also, I think it's important for ski resorts to try and broaden out their offering. And, that's really what Bright has done over the last 20 years or so, is it has moved away from being as reliant on the ski industry as it might have been previously. And, we've now got other types of activities to do in town, things like, we've got a great mountain bike park there. Paragliding has been around for quite a while, but we've got the mountain bike park, we've got trail running is huge in Bright now, gravel riding, all sorts of cycling, those sorts of activities. So the town itself has really transitioned with that, and focused on building out the season with more events through winter, that type of thing.
So Bright has adapted to the green season, but if we do see a change to our winters, like a halvening of the length in the next 20 or so years, will Bright still be impacted by that?
Look, I think we're all going to be impacted by it, for sure. I guess the question is what do we try and do about it now? I think it's important that we try and do as much as we can. I mean, we'd love to hang on to as much skiing as we can here, but the reality is that we're heading in the direction where we're going to lose significant parts of our ski season, if not all of it. I hate to say that, but it's an unfortunate likelihood, and it's probably really just a question of how long it will take, not like when it will happen, not if it will happen. Going to try damn as hard as I can to try and make sure it doesn't. So I think that is, look, we're certainly planning for an alternate industry, and well down that path already. Yeah.
So James, Scott touches on how Australian resorts should go carbon neutral and how ski resorts overseas have been able to achieve this. Arapahoe Basin in Colorado declared this year that they've achieved carbon neutrality ahead of schedule. They've done this through installing on-site solar panels, investing in a community solar farm, electric vehicle charging points, and ensuring all operations run off clean energy.
So a community solar farm, that's basically a cooperative where community members are the shareholders. They own the energy and the profits go back to them. And Scott mentioned Yakandanda there. That's a town that's not too far from Falls Creek and Mount Hotham in Victoria. And that town is aiming to run off 100% renewable energy. And they're very close to reaching that target. They've created a microgrid where they produce and store their own power through solar and batteries within the community. And the microgrid has the added benefit of keeping the town going if a bushfire cuts them off from the rest of the world. The government is willing to fund these projects. All it takes is a bit of initiative from the community. This presents a massive opportunity for ski resorts to take the lead, to invest in local communities and get similar projects up and running in order to achieve carbon neutrality.
Yeah, what Yakandanda achieved is such a positive example of what other communities in Australia as well as ski resorts can achieve, and it's exactly the model that Arapahoe Basin followed.
So sustainability is at the centre of Bright Brewery. Could you tell me more about other initiatives that you have worked on?
Yeah, sure. So, look, brewing is a fairly energy-intensive industry. So one of the first things we did in our when we built our restaurant and brewery was install a 50 kilowatt solar system on that. and over the years we've put a lot of focus on getting more efficient equipment. So the original brewery that we started with was a second-hand one, but it was quite inefficient. So we upgraded that to a more modern, state-of-the-art brew house, partly in conjunction with increasing our volumes as well. And that allowed us to just use much less energy for each volume of beer that we're producing. And then we've since also moved all of our production into a dedicated production facility, also in Bright. And on there we've installed 172 kilowatts of solar. And we've also, with that, managed to get an arrangement with Momentum Energy where we can load share that between the venue and the brewery. So all of the extra energy that we're producing at the production brewery can be used by our kitchen or whatever is running at the venue, which is actually much more energy intensive than the brewing process. So it's a great sort of a real bonus to be able to do that, and makes it viable to actually, make that commitment of installing all that solar out there. So we produce way more electricity than we actually use at the moment.
And we talked about sustainable upper ovens. Other businesses in the area, are they also taking similar measures?
A lot of them are, especially the more energy intensive ones. I know the local laundry have got a huge solar array on theirs, on their building. It is something that we try and really advocate. I think a lot of it really does come down to solar. Bright is actually the perfect location for solar energy because it's we get so many sunny days. I think we get more sunny days than Sydney does. So.
Right, I would not have expected that.
No, and it's just because it's on the north side of the Great Dividing Range. So for example, today driving down here to Melbourne, I left Bright. It was a clear blue sunny day, and arrived in Melbourne, and it's overcast and even raining. So and that's pretty typical. I did the same thing last week. The same thing happened. It was sunny and bright, cloudy here. So we get a lot of sunshine, and so it makes sense to really utilise that. Even through winter, we'll get cold days but sunny days. So solar is perfect. Wind, it's pretty useless. We get almost no wind there. Very, very intermittent. Solar makes perfect sense for us. Yeah.
You said that you try to advocate within the community. What is the power of a business within a community? What can a business achieve within its own community?
Look, I think a key business in a community can actually be like a thought leader, and lead the way. Like if a business like Bright Brewery is not doing what we do, and I guess setting that bar, then it's going to be hard to convince other people that they should be doing something. So, if I feel that we kind of want to lead by example. What sort of corporate citizens do we want to be, and what do we need to do to, show people how it's done, and hopefully that'll inspire other businesses to do it as well. We're quite involved with the Chamber of Commerce, always have been, we'll push for things like renewables, but also even just things like cycle infrastructure through the town. That's one of our big things at the moment. We've got a fantastic rail trail running through town, but we'd love to see more bike paths through the town centre itself, and bike parking and things like that. Bright's not a big town. It's so easy to get around by riding a bike. It's mostly flat, especially in the middle of town. And it would just make a lot of sense to have really thorough infrastructure there for cycling.
Yeah, the Climate Council recently released their Seize the Decade report, where they said that transport emissions could be reduced by half if there's a 30% shift to shared and active transport. So that's like public transport, but also walking and riding. So to do that, we need to convince a lot of people to bike to where they need to go, to bike to work, to bike to the shops. Yeah. What are some arguments for that?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do to achieve that is actually make it easier for people to do it, right? Like if you replace car parking spaces with bicycle parking, you can get half a dozen bike parks in one car parking space. And so then you are incentivizing people to ride a bike rather than drive their car somewhere. You know, if they feel like it's going to be easier to just ride in, do their shopping, go to the cafe, whatever they need to do, and then ride home, or do they drive in, have trouble finding a car park, like most people do, and then get frustrated. And, you know, like there are ways to do it where you can actually make it, with planning and infrastructure, make it easier for people to go down that path of choosing those sorts of options. And also electrification makes everything a lot easier to achieve these days too. You know, electric bikes, scooters, all those types of transport are, I think it can be game changers. You know, you can still have the comfort and ease of moving around, but without having to have a 2-ton steel box around you.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people in Australia are used to taking the car everywhere, so that's a level of comfort that takes a bit of convincing to leave behind.
Yeah.
But once a lot of people adopt these habits, it's hard to go back.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a healthier lifestyle choice as well. You know, so you're kind of getting all the benefits from it.
Bright Brewery is championing sustainability within the community. What's about fostering community spirit and supporting adventure? What does the brewery do in terms of that?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, I guess because that's always been one of my passions is the outdoors and making sure that you get out and about. You know, we have a lot of staff working in our hospitality, but also in the brewery and so on. We have usually around 80 or so staff, even more than that sometimes over summer. And really important to us is that they get to experience the same work-life balance that I moved to Bright for, right? It seemed a bit disingenuous to expect staff to work crazy long hours or anything like that if the whole reason for living in a place like Bright is so that you can actually have that work-life balance. So from the start, we've been really clear with everyone who comes to work for us that we expect them, if they're full-time, they do a 38-hour week. If they happen to do any hours that go over that, we always give them time off in lieu. And once they get to a point where they've accrued, you know, what we consider too much, we'll make them take time off. So, no, you've been working too hard, go and take some time off, go mountain biking or whatever. And as a result, you know, I think we find that we've got a much happier workforce. You know, people that work at the brewery, they know they're going to get time off. They know they're going to be able to plan to go and do all the activities they love. And so, you know, I look at the crew that we've got now, and we've got some incredible athletes in there. We've got Sam, who works in our kitchen. She's an Everest mountaineer. She does work flat out through the summer because she actually we have a special arrangement with her where she can accrue all the extra leave, and then she'll take that and take 3 months off over winter to go mountaineering in Kazakhstan, or, you know, to do an adventure mountain bike, you know, across India or something like that. You know, and so, you know, it's all about finding a lifestyle that works for the people that are in the business. But everyone gets to experience that. It's not like there's some that are working 60 hours a week and, they've just got the nose to the grindstone all the time there. It's really important to us that everyone gets that work-life balance.
So that's how you foster community and adventure within your organisation. What about outside in the wider Bright region?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that comes down to the involvement we have with things like the Chamber of Commerce, but we also do a few initiatives like we have a community keg. So once a month, we will take applications from community organisations where we'll donate a keg to their organisation. We sell it across the bar, and people can pay whatever they want to for a beer from that keg. And all the proceeds from that, 100% of the proceeds from that go back to that organisation. So, somebody could come and say, I just want a beer and I don't want to pay for it. I get a free beer. But, most people will pay whatever they want to contribute to that organisation for the beers they're having. So, yeah, that actually raises, that can raise over $1,000 from a night with that. So it all comes down to that organisation and how they want to run it, I guess. But yeah, we've supported local SES through that, a whole lot of different community sporting groups, and even just all sorts of different community groups through that. So that's one way we're doing that too. Yeah.
Let's rewind and talk through how you managed to set up a brewery.
Yeah, right. So we moved to Bright in 2003. And I guess at the time I was a little bit over working in IT. I still was doing it. We moved there because I could work remotely. I could, spend a couple of weeks developing some software, pop down to Melbourne for a couple of days, meet with clients, and then go back and do a few more weeks work. And so that working remotely kind of suited that quite well. And, I could go for a mountain bike ride at lunchtime or a ski in the morning or something like that. So I thought that was fantastic. But working in IT, you're really working from home and you don't really get to know that many people in the community. And we wanted to do that. So looking around at other options, at the time the town didn't really have a lot to offer as far as local produce was concerned. There was your classic tourist type shops, but there wasn't really a lot else. And so we thought, well, let's bring in all the local produce from this area. We'll get the Miller cheeses in, we'll get the wines from the King Valley, we'll have a little shop, a cafe. We'll get some good coffee from Melbourne and we'll do a cafe with local produce. And that was our first foray into hospitality and tourism in Bright. And around the same time, some friends of ours moved into town as well. And my mate was a home brewer, so we started home brewing together. And that's really how the idea of the brewery popped up. So as a result of that, I went, all right, I think we should start a brewery. So that was probably around 2004, 2005. By the end of 2005, we were making some beer at another brewery and just selling it under the brand Bright Brewery to kind of test the market, and felt that went well. And then we just bit the bullet and decided to jump in head first and get a brewery off the ground. So we pretty much spent all of our savings buying the block of land that the brewery sits on at the moment, because we found that was available, and we thought, this is such an awesome location. We have to have this. So we scraped everything together to buy the block of land, but then of course we had no money left to build anything on it. We initially just put on a rough and ready tin shed, just big enough to cram all the brewing equipment in. So we had this brewing equipment in a tin shed on a prime block of land in the middle of Bright. with an outdoor beer garden that overlooked the park. And it's hard to sort of imagine now because Bright is such a thriving tourist town. But 20 years ago, it really wasn't. It had its busy times, but most of the year it was actually a pretty quiet little town. And so, what we were doing then was quite out of the ordinary, and we had a lot of downtime from a tourism perspective as well. And so, I guess over the years you just keep on reinvesting back into the business, really working on trying to drive and improve the tourism offering. So working with our local tourism authorities like Tourism Northeast, local council, the Victorian tourism industry, and trying to create events and things for people to do in town so that we could build up that year-round visitation. So things like the mountain bike park, we were really involved in getting that off the ground in the early days as well. And that's one of those things where it does lead to year-round tourism. People go mountain biking on a 35-degree day, or they'll go mountain biking in the pouring rain on a 5-degree day. When you're on a mountain bike, you really don't care. Well, you care a bit, but it's still fun. It's fun when it's muddy. It's fun when it's dusty.
Adds to the sense of adventure.
It's just a hoot. So, that's been one of those things that's really helped to build that year-round visitation, that nice, steady tourism offering that allows us to keep people employed, right? And we want to try and, maximise the number of permanent staff that we have, so people can have a proper job that they can live in the town for. And so the more we can build out that tourism market and make it consistently more even year-round, the better that is for the sustainability of our staffing and the business as a whole. So that's been a really important part to us. One of the big challenges over the last few years since COVID and so many people selling their houses in Melbourne and moving to Bright is we've had a real issue with affordable housing, for key workers like our staff, but also nurses and teachers and all of those people are really struggling to find housing in Bright. So that's one of the things we've been really focused on for the last few years is what do we need to do and how do we create more affordable housing in the town so that the people who actually need to work there have got somewhere to live. I don't think there's any easy solution to that, but it's something that we're certainly working on.
What ideas do you have?
We are working with council to try and get a better planning strategy that encourages more affordable housing. A lot of the new houses that are going in are sort of 3-bedroom houses on a nice big block of land because they think that that's what everyone who's got a family wants. The problem is not all the people who live in town are families with 2 or 3 kids. They might be single, they might be elderly, they might be a young couple. So there's actually, I believe, quite a high demand for low maintenance townhouse type accommodation, but that's just not what's getting built. So we're trying to work with council to get some planning schemes in place that help to encourage that type of thing.
Yeah, well, we often expect our places to have backyards. A place like Bright's is abundant with green spaces.
Yeah, the outdoorsy backyard.
Yeah. You're not going to spend all your time sitting in your backyard. You want to go...
And in fact, most people don't even want a backyard. Well, not most. A lot of people don't want a backyard because that's something else they have to look after, which takes away from their activity time. It's in many ways it's much easier if you don't have too much to look after around the house, because then you can spend more time hiking and skiing and mountain biking. Well, I actually think it's a good thing that people are making that tree change to places like Bright. That they're selling up in Melbourne and they're choosing to live. They've decided they can work remotely and they're choosing to live in a place where they can enjoy that lifestyle I think more and more people should be doing that. The challenge is finding a solution where we make sure that there's still affordable housing in the town for everyone who needs to live and work there, right? And I think one of the main problems we've had is that over COVID, it just happened so quickly. It happened and we were kind of caught short with the housing that we did have because, people are selling their valuable house in Melbourne and buying a house in Bright, which is, a fraction was a fraction of the cost. And so what's happened is the prices in Bright have gone from being country town prices to Melbourne prices in the space of 2 years. And that just puts so much pressure on the people who need more affordable housing. And I think, I'd love to see it head that way, but we need to plan for that. We need councils and government to be planning to, grow these regional centres.
Actually, I am curious to ask about the greater investment in the green season and Bright doing things outside of winter. Was that driven by business? Was it driven by government? How did that take shape?
Really, that was driven by us. We realised that we needed a whole lot of staff for summer, and then we'd struggle to, make a dollar over the off seasons. At the time, February is an off season. Just the whole month of February was dead, like literally no one in town. And so, we're trying to run a business, and we're like, well, we need people coming here. We need to, and so we'd start to talk to council and say, look, and Bright's the sort of place where if it's school holidays or it's a long weekend or Easter or something like that, it's always going to be busy. You don't need to have an event on in town. People will come because it's further away. People just need those few extra days so that they can travel. And so, we're like, all right, if we're going to have an event, we want to have it either, in these downtimes, because then at least we'll have some business and it won't be detracting from the other busy times. So, we'd have a few people come to us and they're like, oh, we want to run a film festival. We're like, great, do you want to run it in February? And they're like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And so we're like, cool, something in February. And so suddenly we'd get all this business on a weekend in February when otherwise it would have been completely dead. So we're like, oh, well, so what we really should be doing is looking at all the gaps in our calendar and trying to get things to fill those up, right? And it's just sort of evolved from there. And now we're actually, these days we're talking to council and we're saying, look, if you've got somebody and they're saying they want to run a big event on the, Labor Day long weekend or something like that, you should be telling them no. Tell them if you want to run that event, you have to do it on this other, pick another weekend, but you can't do it that weekend, especially if they want to use council property. So we're trying to build this whole strategic plan around what the tourism offering looks like in Bright and what can happen when, because it is great to have these big events, and sometimes they do need to be on a long weekend or something like that. But if you can avoid it, it just makes such a much more economic difference to the town, which means that everything can run more smoothly. We want to get this nice, consistent visitation. And that also leads into, having a larger permanent population. If we do have people who can work remotely living in the town, then we've got more of a permanent population that are spending their money in town as well, and that supports the businesses year round, not just on those busy weekends. So that's sort of part of our grand vision, I guess, is to make it a more sustainably economical town, because when 20 years ago, a lot of the businesses they're really just hanging on by a thread. They depend so heavily on those super busy times when, to be honest, they actually really couldn't handle all the people that were there, and then they just sort of drift through the rest of the year with looking forward to the next big payday when that busy time will come around again. The problem with that is then you throw a bushfire in there or something like that, and suddenly you lose all of that revenue. So that was, we also started at a time when every 3 years there was a significant bushfire in the area. So, we pretty quickly realised that you really want to, the more you can spread that out, the more you can have people coming year round, the less impact those sorts of events. And, bushfires are a classic climate change enhanced event. So, we really need to be mindful of how we manage those sorts of risks because, if you're not surviving economically, then it's very difficult to do anything sustainable, right? And the stronger a business is, the more capability it has to actually act in a responsible, sustainable manner.
Right. That's very powerful, hearing that a business can lead that change and can show that this could also occur in terms of sustainability and climate action. Thanks for joining POW today, Scott.
Thanks for having me, James. It's been an absolute pleasure, and really appreciate the opportunity to have a bit of a chat about what we're trying to achieve and how we want to work with POW.
That was such an interesting insight from Scott, especially having lived in Harriettville for a summer and seeing how incredibly busy the region got every weekend. It's pretty incredible that Bright Brewery was essentially the driver of that change, and in doing so were able to grow their business and contribute to themselves and the town becoming more sustainable.
Yeah, you're right. Businesses can have a huge role in driving change. If they have the right values at the core, they can use their power and influence to push for lasting action on climate change. Now, the ski sector is facing a huge threat, but with the right amount of foresight and willingness to do so, businesses across the Alps have the capacity to drive change the way Bright Brewery has.
POW wants to continue partnering with businesses like Bright Brewery to create a coalition of collective action that will drive change both within communities and government policies. It is important that this action is meaningful and not superficial greenwashing. Because the environment isn't an afterthought, it should be at the forefront of the ethos of businesses operating in the Australian Alps.
And as lovers of the outdoors, we often need a lot of gear to do the things we love, which is why we need to buy less and buy well, choosing quality over frequent consumption. And we want to partner with businesses that share these values and reinvest in the community. All right, that's all from us today. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you want to support us, our memberships are now live and come with a wide range of perks, and they're a great way for you to get in on the mission to protect our winters. Or if you're feeling thirsty, go get yourself a POW Pale Ale from Bright Brewery.
Thanks everyone, and stay stoked.